Welcome everyone. Great to have you all here. Today I'll be joined by our partner Kolleno and our Clio customers David Turney and James Farha, where we'll be talking about digital disruption in the law community or in the legal industry. So a bit of housekeeping first. This webinar will be recorded and on demand. Please engage with us, use the chat function, use the Q&A for any questions you may have. Just a brief introduction into your host today. My name is Laura Leach and I'm a community marketing specialist here at Clio, and I manage Clio's UK and European community. Just going through the agenda. So it's a quick introduction into our panelists, understanding what digital disruption means in the legal industry, a little bit of talk about our legal trends report and an overview of what that looks like at the moment. And then we'll go into a panel discussion and we'll have some Q&A at the end. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. Starting off with you, Dimitri.
Hi, I'm Dimitri. We're based out of London, England. I'm the CEO of Kolleno, specializing in cash collection and cash management, and very proud to be partnered with Clio to help all the boutique law firms in North America and in continental Europe to accelerate cash flows.
Hi everyone, my name is David Turney, one of the co-founders and managing partner of Avery Law. We are a corporate boutique law firm based in London, and as Laura said, we are Clio customers, but also we are Kolleno customers.
And I'm James Farha, founder and managing partner of Farha Legal. We're a corporate boutique law firm as well, often act alongside and opposite David, and we are also very happy to be partnered with both Clio and Kolleno.
Amazing, thanks guys. Okay, so just moving into what is and understanding digital disruption. So I found a quote online from Gartner where digital disruption is an effect that changes the fundamental expectations and behavior in a culture, market, industry, or process that is caused by or expressed through digital capabilities, channels, and assets. So this is what I researched and what digital disruption means from my perspective. Handing it over to the panelists to see what digital disruption means to you.
Sure.
So,
shall I go, David?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So I think from my experience and my view of the profession, it fundamentally is about competitiveness at this point. I think there's a sort of a trajectory of change where moving probably away from more traditional models based on hourly billing, large firms, large teams, and moving more towards much more fragmented service provision by smaller providers, but the disruption that's happened so far over the last sort of 10 years since I've been out of a big law firm is about competitiveness and small firms being able to essentially run on the same software systems as big firms. So one of the things that we did when we set up the firm was try to sort of emulate the experience that people would have had if they're coming from a big firm. So when lawyers did join us, it wasn't, albeit there are lots of different ways in which we're different, the actual sort of, they could log in and it would seem quite similar to the systems and processes that they had. And the cost of doing that for us was tiny and incremental every time we had someone, instead of the hundreds of thousands of pounds that big law firms had traditionally invested. So I think that's been the biggest disruptor from our perspective. It means that there are lots more of our firms that just can exist. And then, there's obviously a lot of things coming down the track which lend themselves, I think, towards different pricing models, particularly around moving towards value-based pricing, where the kind of traditional high volumes of hours that have been the core of a lot of firms' profitability are no longer really reasonable when there are tools that can do that work quite rapidly, or certainly reduce the amount of time. And so I think people will start to focus much more on how you can deliver your solution valuably. And in theory, the opportunity for law firms is to make more profit by doing less actual work. But that obviously requires a bit of a shift of mindset. And that's the that's the challenge I think that most firms are grappling with at the moment.
Yeah, no, so I was just thinking, because I'm actually away at the moment, 4 hours ahead of the UK, and going to that whole digital disruption piece. 10 years ago, you certainly wouldn't have, well, you probably would have, but it would have been quite difficult. But now it's so simple to continue where you've left off, and exist based on technology that works in a cloud based environment for everyone. So yeah, you can certainly see that digital disruption has helped the industry.
Excellent, David. I think on my side from Kolleno, I think obviously it's a combination of James and David. It's digital disruption is primarily focused on connectivity initially, where people were able to connect and communicate between each other. And then it's improving on the product side, basically for businesses, either how can you focus on your core business and improve your revenues, improve your efficiency, saving time, and saving costs. And then on the cost side is how can you reduce cost? And then both of them are supplemented by technology. So I think for law firms, having Clio in-house, and then how can they reduce, actually focus more on the billable hours, focus more on serving their clients, and then using a parallel Kolleno that allows them to actually reduce the cost of operations. So I think it's a combination of better efficiency on the revenue side and better efficiency on the cost side that increase a greater stakeholder value, and that increase also a greater value for your own business.
Amazing. Okay, which probably is going to lead into what we're going to talk about next in our legal trends report. So a lot of what the guys have just discussed today and what we're going to discuss in the next couple of slides is based on Clio's legal trends report, which they do every year. And we'll post a link into the chat there. I think my colleague Jay will. So I'm going to open the next few slides up for panel discussion. And what we're going to begin talking about first is talent. So our legal trends report has some interesting stats around talent. One very interesting one is 1 in 5 lawyers have left a job in the last year. 9% of lawyers plan to leave in the next 6 months. And 30% of lawyers are actually changing jobs or looking for changing a new job at this current time. So one of the big questions we've had is like, why are these changes happening? Which leads on to the next piece of data Clio looked into. So what they saw was basically a change in attitude in where lawyers wanted to work. So we can see from 2019, the levels are quite high based on where legal professionals were working in an office. So what Clio did was they did an experiment where they analysed IP addresses within the Clio app, and if they found 3 or more IP addresses working at the same location, they labelled that as an office. They noticed that after what they found in 2020 is that the number of lawyers working from offices had dropped, which kind of makes sense because we went into lockdown, COVID-19 happened, but the really biggest interesting thing they found was that these levels have not came back up. So instead they're going increasingly down or they're keeping steady. So a few questions I have for the guys is, how has technology helped retain talent, improve your employee experience, and how do you see technology continuing to play a role in talent retention?
I'm happy to start. I mean, I'll take the first one. The tech, how has it helped retain talent? I mean, I think Laura, you touched on it with the graph and the post-COVID environment that we all are in now. Obviously this flexible solution environment that the legal industry has moved towards. I think, unfortunately, some law firms, and we can put our hands up for sort of sometimes moving back towards an office environment for the benefit of training and growth. But naturally there is that flexibility for people which is where the technology comes in, and as I just said, I'm working remotely, and that's the benefit that technology has provided in the form of retaining talent. We all know that obviously flexible working is not the only thing that people look for when it comes to retention, but certainly the technology is helping that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for us, we've always been a remote first firm. So when I set up firm, we were 100% remote. That was quite a bit before COVID. And so technology has sort of facilitated attracting talent from anywhere, which I think has been very helpful, and then retaining them by, offering them the opportunity to work from wherever they want to. So we've actually got several team members who aren't based in the UK, and several that are outside of London. And that flexibility has also been helpful recently with the sort of upward pressure on pricing of legal talent in London as well, which is quite a significant factor in trying to obtain new talent. So being able to provide that flexibility definitely has a big advantage, because you can offer something that's not just cash-based compensation, but the corollary of that is exactly as David said, which is how you then develop a good sort of learning environment for more junior team members to progress people's careers. And that's something that I would say, we're probably we're actually moving towards having a small office that people will go to. We actually have a very small office at the moment, but I'm the only person who goes there, so I wouldn't say it's really helping with the battle on that. But that's some FaceTime is pretty valuable for people who are learning, and so and the technology tools that exist probably don't fill that gap quite adequately.
Excellent, thank you, James. Very clear. I think on our side also is a little bit of a hybrid. We as a young company in the software space, our talent is very young, so they're out of university or out of different professional programs. So most of the time we're office based, we're digital first, but we're not remote first. And I think on the technology side, what helped us is to really use collaborative tools, like using Notion, Slack. People, for instance, in the month of August, everyone work remotely, or the full month of December, people can work remotely. And that we experiment that last year. So for a 4 weeks time, no one is in the office, but then the remaining of the year, majority of the people are in the office. And obviously it's approaching this using the tools, but again, the tools needs to be tech enabled, human enabled. And I think that's what we're always forgetting, is training how Notion is using Notion, or how Clio is using Clio, and how basically Kolleno is using Kolleno, meaning that it's really be able to, we have a 4 weeks onboarding program for everyone who starts, and basically, and half of that 4 weeks focuses really on how to use those tools. I think it's if you get up to speed on using the right tools from the beginning, then there is no obstacles in terms of inefficiencies, in terms of allocation of your time and resources. So I think technology definitely help us to, it's very, adopting technology is critical, and that's very critical at the beginning when we recruit talent. And then it's a continuous improvement of using technology as well, and different tools that exist out there.
Okay, so Dimitri, you've mentioned that's kind of like how you've managed it within your business, but have you seen a shift in the way your staff work now that you've adopted all these new technologies, and how you implement it from working from home versus hybrid versus office?
Very good question. Like, I mean, for instance, we implemented to use a collaborative tool called Notion, and that tool completely changed our life. We don't have any, we write only one single summary for a job description. Nothing is in my emails. Nothing is in the emails of the branding of wordings that is used, for instance, on the talent side. Basically, all the job descriptions, all the recruiting questionnaires, all the criteria in terms of values and selection criteria that we're looking to recruit people are all into one single collaborative document. And then when the individual join us and works from home, they also have guidelines that are quite prescriptive, and how to use your headphones, how to use Notion, how to use, for instance, Zoom. Even the title of every individual has to come with their job title when they open a Zoom account. So I think it's very, in order to set yourself for success as a company, if you have all those guidance very clear and clean and easy access. And this is basically how do you update, for instance, your LinkedIn page, every single messaging that is going outside of the firm. So it's having this structure in place. I understand that a lot of companies, they are more laissez-faire at the initial of their stage business, but it's hard to grow a firm. We've grown from 4 individuals to 24. We're 24 people. We're supposed to surpass 50 people by the end of this year. So it's putting those putting that foundation in place initially.
Okay, and David or James, have you noticed a shift in any of your staff when they work from home, or whether in the office or hybrid? Have you noticed anything better, anything worse?
I think I'd echo what Dimitri says, and about the need for a heightened level of discipline in the way that you do things. And I think it's clear, actually, to Dimitri's credit, when you interact with Kolleno, you can see that that's in place, and the team are all very coherent and deal in the same way. And I think it's easy to ignore that and think that you're just, especially lawyers who tried it, in my experience, give each other quite a lot of leeway. So relatively highly trained professionals who like to do things a certain way, and we sort of just allow them to get on with things. And actually, that approach isn't always appropriate, because people are just doing things fundamentally differently. Every now and then I'll discover that someone isn't using our document management system at all, or something like that, and there's things that you just don't realize unless you're sort of checking in a way that's not second nature in our business to do. So I think the quality of people's output is probably a bit higher because they're happier, they're able to be more flexible, and law is a profession that naturally requires a high input of time in order to produce a decent product. So giving people the freedom to how and when they spend that time is quite valuable, but at the same time, making sure that we as a firm become more of a firm and more coherent, and sort of we have a sort of natural brand essence is more challenging in a way, and requires a different way of thinking than the way that sort of comes a second nature to a lot of lawyers, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna add something real quickly. I think generally, and I'm just generalizing, but I think lawyers, we're all quite good at, we'll get quite busy. Clients request things. We're all working, to deadlines often. And I certainly, forget sometimes just real simple, clear communication when it comes to my team and what we're working on. So I find that if I'm working remotely, sometimes things aren't quite as fluid as perhaps they are in the office, but that's not necessarily down to my team. That's actually down to me, and not actually just spending a little bit of time. So I think Dimitri mentioned Notion, and and I certainly find we've trialed lots of different software, but I actually don't think it really matters what software you use. It could be as simple as, it could be a simple piece of software, but it all comes down to just spending a little bit of time to communicate as a team, whether you're obviously when you're in an office, it's naturally simpler because you're next to each other, and you can all hear each other. So yeah, that's obviously technology has harnessed that, but I think us as lawyers, certainly me, need to probably, just spend the time.
Of course. I don't think I have any more questions on that. Bar a kind of standard one, I'll throw it back to you, James, is do you see working from home kind of every more the legal professionals shifting towards it, or do you think it'll come back on track from the Legal Trends report, just based on our data?
My guess is that medium term, people will shift back towards working in the same place. I think there's there's a younger generation of lawyers who are coming online who I have the impression have more of an expectation of remote working as being part of the mix. In the last city firm that I worked in, the culture was that you could work from anywhere. You could choose, essentially, you could work from anywhere, but you had to do the work, and there was a very high volume of work that usually meant that it was most appealing to do it from the office, where you could get it done most effectively. But I think that there will be a general shift back towards that, because also this point about knowledge transition from senior lawyers to junior lawyers, the way that people learn traditionally is through kind of absorbing, listening to conversations. The points that are not commoditized, that are not really commodity, that where lawyers are really adding value, which is probably the area where the legal profession is going to be focused more and more and more as it gets eaten away by automation, software, and AI, whatever, are the bits actually that you need to be present with someone while they're talking to the client, while they're in the meeting, while they're thinking their way out of a problem, that you can't really do on Slack or Teams or even on Zoom. So my guess is we'll shift back towards in person.
And Dimitri?
I think I totally agree with James. I think experience comes from the ground, and that's really critical to have this hybrid approach. But especially, I think it's a generational issue that can happen in 10 years' time. Younger generation, especially in the law space, don't have necessarily the credibility or the talent that the mid-level management has acquired over the last 10 years. So that will be an interesting one to see. I think it's a cyclical effect, and that will be interesting to see. 10 years from now, people are very short-sighted, and they're looking at it only for a very short-term perspective. But in the long run, same thing for software companies. It does require to have a talent that works in-house, that have discussions, that have dispute between each other, and really having this deep conversations, either about product or even legal cases. And I think that's what is. There is nothing that replaces human connectivity, physical human connectivity, when it comes to at the start of your career or even at the mid level.
Amazing. Okay, thank you all so much. I'm going to move on to cash flow and some more data results from our Legal Trends report. So we noticed that the 8-hour day has gone from 2.4 utilized to 2.64 hours utilized. So it doesn't really seem a lot, but the small incremental increases actually really add up. So in addition to that increase, the utilization that there are 2.2 hours realized compared to 1.9 from previous years. And when we look at collection rate, we can see that clients are now paying for a full 2 hours a day, meaning that lawyers are getting paid for almost and an additional 2.5 hours per week. So if we move on to the next slide, currently the average law firm collects only $748 for every $1,000 of billable work. So this means that firms could collect up to 34% more revenue by optimizing their realization and collection rates. So big jump. The questions I have for our panelists today is, one of the key challenges we have been hearing is around cash flow management, especially in the current economic climate. How are you working to ensure adequate cash flow for your firm, and how has technology played a role? I'm going to come to you first, David.
I think I think I should probably mention Kolleno, but I mean, obviously for a law firm, cash flow management is really important. When you have full-time employees, lawyers that expect to be paid. Clients. Some clients are very good payers. Some tend to not pay on time, and I think often, as a small boutique that doesn't have its own cash, collection team. We don't have a large accounts team, for example, who are chasing people. We certainly felt that we probably needed to rely on some form of technology to somewhat automate some of our own cash collection, which is why we found obviously looked at Kolleno as a solution for that. But generally, even if you have an automation suite, it does require, and what we do with clients a lot is it's more about the transparency and nature of fees, and when you expect them to pay and pay, and being transparent and communicating key payment terms to them so that they're not sort of unexpected as to when an invoice comes out. I often find that when they are up to speed, everything's transparent, that they often pay incredibly quickly because they're not surprised by the invoice they're receiving.
And James?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say cash flow is probably more of an acute problem in law firms than a lot of other service businesses, because the salaries are quite high. The cycle for payment can be quite long, and if you do the type of work that David and I do, where people are often raising money, they're usually raising money because they don't have money, and therefore you get sort of stuck in someone else's time frame where they may not be able to pay a bill until they close the round, and you may have to continue working until they close the round, and those two things may take much longer than you like. So being able to collect the bills that are collectible quickly is really valuable. So that's why we adopted Kolleno for that very reason, that cash flow has probably been the most uncomfortable sort of part of the business as we've grown. And the more you grow, the worse it gets, basically. So having a system that can automate a process that we started doing it manually, and I think that's been my lesson of adopting software, is that usually it's better to put software in over the top of a process that you've got some kind of manual system in place, rather than just going from cold. It's automated a process, much more efficient, much more effective than the time we were spending sending pre-reminders, post-reminders, on the day reminders. It's great to have that, and also not to be taking someone else in the team's time to become the credit controller for the day or whatever. It's fantastic. The cost is exactly in the place where it should be, to be for the amount of time that we recover it to. So it's really important. It also adds this fantastic portal, which I think the clients really like. We often get asked for statements of account, those kinds of things, which are quite, again, for us, time consuming to produce. And so just being able to send a link and say, here was 2 years worth of billing history, knock yourself out and download the bills, is fantastic. So and the open banking integration has been great as well. Giving people a quick way to pay that doesn't cost us very much money.
Okay, and did you find it increased your billable hours by doing all this?
It definitely, you definitely have hours that can be recovered for billable hours. Yeah, doesn't there are all sorts of other places where they can disappear again, but you get them back to do something.
And David, did you find by adopting a cash flow technology that your billable hours increased?
Yes. Yeah, when you think, not that I sort of specifically recorded the data, but I can say for certain that it freed up time. James mentioned that sort of spending a day, that would very often be the case. You would have like a management meeting, and then you would spend the day chasing, all your bad debtors. So, just implementing, a very good piece of software like Kolleno can, really free up your time.
Amazing. Okay. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move on to our next topic, which is tech stack and again, we'll be referring to our legal trends report. So this is where we look at data versus people using cloud-based software versus people not using cloud-based software. And we have identified basically their relationships with colleagues, clients, personal life, etc. So 88% of law firms said that their relationships with their clients are better with cloud-based systems. That's a 22% difference between people who are not using cloud-based systems. Then you've got 79% said their relationships with their colleagues are better because they use a cloud-based system. This is a 22% gap to those who don't use a cloud-based system. So it's kind of striking here to myself and to the Clio team who did this research, was that cloud-based technology really up-levels not only your firm or your business, but it actually up-levels you as a person. So the questions I have for the guys today is, and we'll start with you, James. what tools do you use as part of your technology and within your firm?
Sure. So we use Clio and Kolleno, obviously. So Clio does all of our practice management, matter opening. It is the kind of central record for all of our client data, effectively, including time entries and billing. Kolleno obviously does the invoice chasing once they've been billed and can produce statements and take payments from clients automatically, which is fantastic. And then we use Net Documents as our document management system, which has a pretty good integration into Clio, and we use a couple of different of their products inside of that. And then we run the rest of the firm on Office 365 mostly, for the most part, and Xero for accounts, and just started experimenting with Zapier or Zapier, which I can never say. Most at a personal level, I always want them to put an extra P in there, but they haven't. So and I sort of just trying out different sort of small administrative tasks that probably soaking up a little bit too much time on my part, and then the idea is to develop some recipes that will be universal through the firm that we can then send other people. If they want to use them, they can. If they don't want to use them, that's absolutely fine. And that's pretty much it. We also have a Google Drive thing, because clients love to send us Google Drive links, which yes, it's important to be able to integrate with the things that our clients use, and that's basically our approach. For the most part, we try to do what our clients are doing. We've tried things like Slack in the past, but to be honest, we've stuck with the Office suite.
Yeah.
And that's it really. And that was it probably looks the same as a lot of other firms. Technology stack. The only other thing we use is something called Legal for the client onboarding, and that's just for the AML, digital passport checks, those kinds of things. They also have a way of taking funds on account through their platform, which is quite helpful.
Okay, perfect. And David?
I was just thinking as James was rattling off the list, I was like, it seems like we've got the same firms, but I mean. I mean, the text that's somewhat similar, and I'm sure we use them in very similar ways. We're also Kolleno, Clio customers, Net Documents customers. I found Net Documents to be the better document management system across the remainder. We've plugged in. Sorry, do apologize for my children just coming. I told them to be quiet whilst we're on the call. And we've plugged in software like Henchman, for example, which is a new clause sort of what we call like a living knowledge management system, which also integrates very nicely with Net Documents. But I mean, generally, when it comes to a tech stack, I mean, we're always pivoting. I think that's what's nice about being a smaller boutique in that sense. I never tie myself to a piece of technology that we don't utilize. We won't agree to normally a more than 12-month term. So, and we've used a lot of software which we've then quickly got rid of because it's just not lived up to, or we haven't had the time to implement it properly. It's required a little bit more, I suppose, technology or development knowledge than we have in the firm. So I think the technology that sticks for lawyers in boutique law firms, that don't have legal ops managers and people with technology backgrounds, I think the ones that stick are the ones that just really work well. They're the ones we will keep and implement.
Okay, perfect. And have you seen like there's a better client experience by adopting all of these technologies and implementing them into your firm? Like, how do your clients feel about it?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, I don't think clients necessarily care, if I'm being honest, what technology you utilize. What I find is that all clients really are looking for is responsiveness. So, and if technology helps in you being a more responsive lawyer and law firm, then that keeps them happy.
Yeah, I'd say that the two buckets for the software adoption, one is sort of risk management and security, and then the other is kind of convenience, either for the client or for us. I saw Marion had just put in the chat that they've lost a load of Google Drive data, and I think that's one of the issues why we've never used Outlook. People keep telling me, particularly our bookkeeper keeps saying, why are you paying for extra, document management software? And the reason is exactly that, which is just, having something that is industry standard, that, a lot of brand name firms are using, gives me the comfort that I can sort of say to the clients, I know, that we're doing the right thing, that is the best practice in relation to your data. And so security, when we were setting out, I think security was a big consideration, and then convenience as a sort of second consideration. But in terms of the clients, I agree with David. I don't think they really know. Attempts to send them links to portals and things have never really been very successful for us, and they usually just get annoyed at having to log into something. They just want it done basically as quickly as possible, and in a format that they can easily handle. The only caveat to that is the Google Drive. I think if someone sends us a Google Drive link and we go, oh, but we're on Office 365, they just, they get annoyed quite quickly as well, which I totally understand. So, so that's why we've now got a Google Drive as an extra, just so that we can deal with Google Docs if we need to.
Excellent. Dimitri, do you have anything to add?
I mean, maybe one sentence. I think if I have to summarize what David and James said, it's all about simplicity. And simplicity towards your own business and simplicity towards your clients, and it's using as minimum as possible with our greatest outcome. It's like a relationship one-to-many, and I think having only a handful of amount of time in a day, so you're better off to use the right technology stack that allows you to communicate with your clients externally, and that allows you to be more efficient within your teammates.
Amazing. Okay. Thanks, guys. Moving on to digital adoption, I have some questions for you. So over the last 3 to 5 years, Dimitri, I'll come to you first. Have you seen a shift in how legal is leveraging digital tools?
I think there is few elements. One of them that I can say for our experience, law firms became very preventive in terms of digital adoption. And why do I mean by that is that they're willing to explore different solutions before the problem arises. So I presume it was probably not the case. So we've been speaking with a number of law firms who are using Clio, and they can see that problem or that pain of credit control, late payments, invoice management coming up in half a year or 3 years time or 2 years time, depending on their growth manager partners. And then the digital adoption is that they're willing to explore different tools. So I think that's something beautiful to see in terms of lawyers who are actually becoming more tech savvy and willing to deviate from their comfort zone to actually look at different solutions that exist there. I don't think it was the case 5 years ago. I think it's something that really, one of the core benefits of COVID is that it has accelerated digital adoption by 10 years. And I think the next 2 to 3 years, maybe the digital adoption been accelerated by at least 15 to 20 years.
Amazing. James or David, do you have anything to add? Have you seen any firms leveraging digital tools lately?
Yes. I suppose, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit later. But obviously, the thing that's on everyone's mind right now is the implementation of GPT, right? And I actually raised a question on LinkedIn the other day about, and James picked up the privacy and security concerns around, the use of lawyers, and how we can harness AI. Because, I'm certainly thinking of it. I'm sort of walking to the office sometimes and thinking, how can I implement AI? It's the buzz at the moment. Everyone's thinking about it. How do we implement it? It's there, but there's some serious security risks with it at the moment. How you implement it, I don't know. So that's the shift. And Dimitri obviously said, people are thinking about a couple of years' time or a year's time. Everyone's thinking about how AI will change the legal industry. Will it replace lawyers? Personally, I don't think so. Will it be able to do legal research? Perhaps, I don't know. But these are all the things that I'm certainly thinking about right now.
Yeah, I think you know, it's been interesting to see how much noise is created around the launch of ChatGPT. And it's appealing, the idea that a computer could sort of just take what's in your head, you advise the client, this is what you need to do, and then a robot kind of spits out a document, and that would be in some senses an interesting proposition. But I think the reality is probably much more mundane, and actually the things that you chip away at first are the things that you either shouldn't be charging for or can't charge for, which is lots of time spent changing the number of founders in the shareholders agreement, or sometimes a client will say, oh, we actually want our documents all to be feminized so that they're all she instead of he. You think, okay, fine, you could do that, but it's not very productive use of time. And those are the types of automations I think that can be really valuable, so that you can cut down on that first draft, the time to the first draft, the time to implement changes. So those things which are sort of broadly AI, but they're not the kind of very exciting AI style innovations that people are seeing, where you can have a conversation with these slightly scary seeming bots. But from the data perspective, I mean, I think it is very worrying, because they are basically black boxes. You don't know where it's going, how it's being used, how it's being reused in the future. To the extent that sort of you're uncomfortable about putting things into search engines, and privacy data concerns around Google, etc. I think the AI bots seem to have the same problem, but just multiplied many times over. And so actually putting would I put client confidential data into ChatGPT? Absolutely not, is the simple answer. So because you just have no idea where it's going to go, how it's going to be used, or and you probably can read the privacy policy and find out, but that almost certainly doesn't relate to how it's actually going to be used anyways. So yeah, I think that there are lots of ways where we can just be more efficient and extract more value and be more profitable on a sort of fixed fee basis, those kinds of things. And those are the places there'll be a lot of adoption. They're quite intensive though, to actually do that well. You usually have to put in quite a lot of upfront time, and given that lawyers are charging for their time most of the time, the cost can be quite intimidating if you need to put in 20, 50 hours to adopt something. And quite often it needs a decent amount of time from a relatively senior person in the firm who knows what the answer is, that needs to be sort of programmed in. Then yeah, I think that can be challenging. I mean, if firms have very well documented processes, it's probably a lot easier to give it to a paralegal or someone similar and have them implement. But a lot of smaller firms like ours, we don't have stacks and stacks of documentation around our processes. We kind of just do things quite a lot of the time, and I think that probably reflects a lot of other firms as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely an opportunity that is going to come into the legal industry, but at this point in time, like, what do you think is a big opportunity for the legal industry in regards to technology?
I was thinking there's probably there's certainly more and more law firms retaining probably talent or technology talent, not necessarily in a technology role, but also an operations role to develop internal solutions. And that's certainly something I find as we're growing. It's we're using all of these technologies, and are they still all fit for purpose? And I think there will probably be a point where actually smaller boutiques like us think, right, we need to bring in someone who's got this experience, hands-on, keep on top of all the software, make sure it's all working, talking together through the APIs, make sure we're all using them correctly. So I mean, that's sort of how I would see law firms perhaps, moving or shifting, perhaps less lawyers, but more operational staff.
Yeah. I think from my perspective, I see it slightly different. My understanding is that there'll be marketplaces that will answer all the questions from ChatGPT to any individual's concerns of any law rules or documentations or answers that anyone is looking for. And then based on that answer, they'll be able to have access to, for instance, Farha Law or Avery Law. So that will be interesting. So I think the whole world will use the technology. But at the end of the day, if you want to escalate that further, so I think the initial step will be the use of technology, and there'll be a marketplaces for law firms, and those marketplaces will initially be dictated by OpenAI, and then subsequently supplemented by law firms. I think this is where is the future. That's my perspective from obviously from a tech entrepreneur, and from a tech perspective, I think people will always turn themselves to technology initially, to Google or any other platform, and then based on that marketplace, they will be seeking the best practice in their neighborhood, in their city, and the best professional that has the expertise in that specific area.
Amazing. Okay. Guys, that's really, really helpful. We're basically at time, but I just want to open up. Does any of our audience have any questions before we wrap up today? Have we got any questions in our Q&A, Jay?
Yeah, we have one question here. So just curious, this is probably for David and James, but do you have any advice for a law firm looking to get started on their digital journey, start to evaluate some tools? Do you have any advice?
I would pick up on something that David mentioned, which is you need to be pretty flexible about trying things out, and all of the tools that you'll look at will promise you something. They'll have a very well constructed marketing program, which you'll be inclined to believe and adopt, and you will only find out whether in the context of your firm whether or not that value proposition is fulfilled or not by using it. And so you need ideally to agree the shortest terms that you can. I mean, we started trying to push for 3-month trials with all of our 3-month break with all of our new softwares. We actually at the beginning made some horrendous mistakes doing things like really negotiating really good terms for long contracts and things that after 6 months you just realize that you're not going to use it. You're stuck in the contract for 2 years or something. So I would just keep stay very sort of agile, for want of a different word, and don't agree to long terms, so that you can just try them well, throw your team at it for 3 months and see whether everyone adopts it and finds it great, and if they don't, then be prepared to walk away from it and try something else.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that as well, one thing we do is, rather than taking licenses for everyone in the firm for a piece of technology, we'll often get one license and I'll trial it alone before we sort of roll it out, see if it's actually worth rolling it out. That's always helpful in terms of keeping costs down. I mean, and then there's obviously the security and privacy angle that we've always got to be sort of concerned about when it comes to these things.
And then the other thing I'd say is just be programmatic about shutting down licenses that you are no longer using. It's very, very easy, especially when contracts roll year to year, to find suddenly that you're paying for 19 users and actually you've only got 4 people in the software, and you realize 2 months into the renewal, and then customer service kind of says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, it's too late," but in April 2024 we'll be able to help you out. It's kind of incredibly frustrating and expensive for nothing.
Okay, guys, thanks so much for joining us today. A big shout out to David, James, and Dimitri. If anybody's interested in having a demonstration with Clio or Kolleno, I think Jay is going to run a poll there. Just click yes or no. But thanks very much to everyone for joining.